A queen rules a wealthy kingdom at the edge of the desert. A bird carries news of her across the ancient world. A king sends a letter that may lead to faith, diplomacy, or war. She answers not with an army, but with a test. Then she leaves her throne, crosses the distance between kingdoms, and enters one of history's most famous encounters. The Bible remembers her as the foreign sovereign who challenged Solomon with difficult questions. The Quran remembers a ruler who consulted her advisors, understood the destruction of invasion, and changed when signs overturned certainty. Ethiopia remembers Makeda, mother of Menelik, and ancestor of kings. The Arab and Muslim world remembers Bilqis. Yemen preserves the cities and temples of the real kingdom of Saba, but the stones have not revealed her name. Was she a historical monarch, a memory transformed by scripture, or a figure created where trade, faith, and political imagination met? To search for the Queen of Sheba is to cross three landscapes. The first is the land, Marib, its dam, temples, inscriptions, and caravan roads. The second is the text, stories written and retold across Hebrew, Arabic, and Gaz traditions. The third is the human imagination, which turned one unnamed queen into 1,000 different faces. This is not only the story of a woman who sought wisdom, it is the story of how civilizations remember, how rulers use legend, and how history survives when certainty disappears. Some names survive because they were carved into stone. Others survive because they were repeated in prayer, recited beside fires, painted in palaces, whispered in royal courts, and carried from one civilization to another. The Queen of Sheba belongs to the second kind. For almost 3,000 years, the world has remembered a queen whose original name it may never have known. In the Hebrew Bible, she is simply the Queen of Sheba. She arrives in Jerusalem with a great caravan and tests King Solomon with difficult questions. She sees the order of his court, hears his answers, praises his wisdom, and returns to her own land. In the Quran, she is a powerful ruler whose people worship the sun. She receives a letter from Solomon, consults her counsel, avoids a reckless war, travels to meet him, confronts signs that challenge her certainty, and declares her submission to God. In Islamic tradition, she becomes Bilqis. In Ethiopian tradition, she becomes Makeda, the mother of Menelik, and an ancestor of a royal dynasty that claimed descent from Solomon. In paintings, poems, operas, films, and popular memory, she becomes many other things: philosopher, temptress, diplomat, convert, lover, mother, African queen, Arabian queen, seeker of wisdom, symbol of wealth, and mirror of the age that imagined her. But behind all these images lies a harder question. Was she real? The question appears simple, but it immediately divides into several others. Was there a real kingdom called Saba or Sheba? Yes. Its heartland stood in southern Arabia, in the region of modern Yemen. Its rulers commissioned monumental temples. Its scribes filled stone with inscriptions. Its engineers redirected seasonal waters through one of the ancient world's most impressive irrigation systems. Its merchants participated in networks that connected Arabia with the Mediterranean, the Horn of Africa, and lands farther east. Was there a powerful queen who ruled that kingdom and visited Solomon in Jerusalem? Here, the certainty ends. No currently known inscription securely introduces a Sabaean monarch as the woman from the scriptural stories. Archaeology has recovered the kingdom, but not the queen. Scripture preserves the queen, but does not supply the kind of contemporary evidence historians would need to confirm her biography, and yet absence is not the same as impossibility. Ancient archives are incomplete. Inscriptions survive unevenly. Cities are destroyed, reused, buried, looted, or left unexcavated. Royal records celebrate some events and ignore others. The ancient world does not owe the modern world a complete answer. The Queen of Sheba therefore stands at a border. On one side is history: stone, soil, chronology, trade, architecture, and writing. On the other is memory: scripture, storytelling, identity, faith, and legend. Her power comes from standing in both worlds at once. To search for her, we must resist the temptation to begin with romance. We must first enter the world that could have produced her, a world where rain was rare, but human ingenuity created fields in the desert, a world where perfume was sacred, incense was wealth, and caravans crossed distances that could consume months of a human life, a world where kings spoke through gifts, temples, embassies, riddles, and war, a world divided by seas, deserts, languages, and gods, yet tied together by trade, a world divided by seas, deserts, languages, and gods, yet tied together by trade. Somewhere within that world, a story took shape. A queen from the south hears of a king famous for wisdom. She travels north. She asks questions. She sees wonders. She returns transformed. The details change according to the teller, but the journey remains. The name Sheba is the familiar English form. In the languages of ancient southern Arabia, the kingdom is more accurately called Saba. Its center lay in what is now Yemen, a land that outsiders often imagine only as desert, but which contains sharp ecological contrasts: coastal plains, rugged highlands, deep valleys, and the edges of the great Arabian desert. Seasonal rains descend on the mountains. Wadis channel water through otherwise dry landscapes. Human settlement depends not merely on rainfall, but on the knowledge required to capture it. Saba did not exist alone. Ancient South Arabia contained several kingdoms, including Mayan, Qataban, and Hadramaut. Their borders changed. Their alliances shifted. Their rulers fought, negotiated, built, taxed, worshipped, and competed for access to land and trade. Saba became one of the earliest and most influential of these powers. Its capital was Marib, positioned near the point where mountain waters could be distributed into two broad areas of cultivation. The location was not accidental. It transformed geography into political power. A kingdom is not sustained by royal jewelry or monumental gates alone. It depends on systems: water, grain, labor, law, ritual, taxation, security, and communication. Marib brought these systems together. The city stood beside a human-made oasis created and maintained through generations of hydraulic engineering. Fields produced food. Temples attracted offerings and pilgrims. Roads connected the capital to other settlements. Royal authority was written into stone and embedded in the management of water. The Sabians used a family of old South Arabian languages and wrote in a distinctive script composed of strong geometric letter forms. Inscriptions recorded dedications, building works, military campaigns, legal regulations, tribal affiliations, divine protection, and the names and titles of rulers. These texts are essential because they allow the ancient people of South Arabia to speak in their own official language, rather than appearing only through the stories of outsiders. The inscriptions reveal a society that was organized but not simple. Identity could involve city, tribe, clan, kingdom, temple, and deity. Authority could be royal, communal, religious, and aristocratic. The political vocabulary of Saba changed across centuries, reminding us that even a famous ancient kingdom was not a frozen civilization. Its rulers built in stone and mud brick. They commissioned temples to major deities, especially Almaka, the principal god associated with Sabaean state religion. Monumental sanctuaries such as the Iwam Temple and the Baran Temple near Marib expressed wealth, order, and sacred authority. Modern visitors sometimes call Baran the throne of Bilqis. The name reflects the gravitational force of the legend. Once a place is connected to a famous figure, it becomes difficult to see it without that figure. Yet archaeologically, the monument is a temple complex, not a confirmed royal throne room belonging to the queen of the scriptural stories. This distinction does not diminish the site. It makes the real achievement clearer. Monolithic pillars, broad courts, carefully fitted stone, inscriptions, and controlled approaches created a stage for worship and public ceremony. Architecture transformed religious ideas into movement. A person entering the sanctuary did not simply observe power, they walked through it. The kingdom's prosperity was linked to agriculture, but also to exchange. Southern Arabia was famous for aromatic substances, especially frankincense and myrrh. These resins were valuable because they belonged to many worlds at once. They were perfume, medicine, offering, luxury, and symbol. They burned in temples and homes. Their smoke rose in rituals from Arabia to the Mediterranean. Sabaean merchants and their partners moved incense north through networks of roads and stations. Other goods also traveled: spices, textiles, metals, precious stones, ivory, and products from Africa and Asia. The old phrase, Arabia Felix, fortunate Arabia, was created by outsiders, but it reflects the image of a southern land enriched by rare commodities. The fortune was never effortless. It rested on dangerous journeys, political protection, negotiated passage, animal power, and the ability to move water and goods through difficult terrain. Imagine the information carried by a caravan: news of wars, rumors of kings, prices in distant markets, descriptions of temples and palaces, stories of unusual rulers. A merchant who traveled between South Arabia and the Levant did not transport goods alone. He transported reputation. That is how the fame of a king could reach a queen. That is how the fame of a queen could enter the literature of another people. The scriptural story of the Queen of Sheba is built around distance, wealth, and knowledge. Those elements make sense in the world of long-range exchange. A southern ruler with access to aromatics and gold-like wealth would be a fitting diplomatic visitor to a northern king whose wisdom was said to attract the nations. But fitting is not the same as proven. The real Saba gives the story a credible geography. It does not certify every event in the story. Historians must therefore hold two thoughts together. First, Saba was not a fantasy. It was a major civilization whose remains still stand. Second, the existence of Saba does not automatically prove the existence of a particular queen, a particular journey, or a particular meeting. The kingdom is historical. The queen remains elusive, and the deeper we enter the world of Saba, the more striking the mystery becomes. Its rulers placed their names on monuments. Its communities recorded achievements. Its temples preserved thousands of lines of text. Yet the most famous person associated with the kingdom is a woman whose name is absent from the earliest version of her story. To understand Saba, begin not with gold, but with water. In a semi-arid landscape, political power can be measured in the ability to predict, capture, redirect, and distribute a flood. Seasonal rain falling in the highlands rushes downward through valleys. Uncontrolled, it may vanish into the desert or destroy what stands in its path. Controlled, it can turn dry earth into fields. The ancient irrigation system at Marib was not a single miraculous wall raised in one moment. It developed through construction, repair, extension, and administrative knowledge accumulated across generations. Its most famous feature, the Great Dam of Marib, worked with sluices, canals, embankments, and distribution networks that directed water toward cultivated zones. The system made possible a vast oasis, but engineering alone cannot explain it. Every large water system creates questions of authority. Who repairs the stone after a flood? Who commands labor? Who receives water first? How are disputes settled? What happens when one community takes more than its share? How does a ruler turn maintenance into legitimacy? At Marib, the landscape itself became political. The survival of farms depended on collective action and organized control. A damaged canal could threaten harvests. A failed embankment could weaken a kingdom. The dam later became surrounded by stories of catastrophe and divine judgment. In Islamic memory, the people of Saba appear in another Quranic passage associated with gardens, ingratitude, and a devastating flood. Over centuries, the collapse of the dam became a symbol of the fall of prosperity itself. The historical structure, however, experienced multiple phases and repairs. Like many ancient works, it was not simply built, used, and suddenly destroyed. It had a long life. That long life reminds us that the achievement of Marib belonged not to one legendary monarch, but to generations of engineers, laborers, administrators, farmers, and rulers. Near the city stood sacred spaces that communicated another kind of order. The Awam Temple, sometimes known in later tradition as the Sanctuary of Bilqis, was dedicated to Al-Makka. Its monumental form and inscriptions show that religion stood at the center of Sabaean public life. A temple was more than a place where individuals prayed. It could receive offerings, anchor collective identity, legitimize authority, preserve records, and attract people from beyond the immediate city. The movement of pilgrims also moved wealth and information. At another sanctuary, the Baran Temple, tall stone pillars framed an imposing entrance. Modern association with the Queen of Sheba has made those columns visually inseparable from her legend. They often appear in documentaries, travel photographs, and popular illustrations as if they were the remains of her palace. Yet the stones do not say, "She stood here." They say something both more limited and more reliable. A sophisticated Sabaean civilization built here, worshipped here, and displayed power here. The difference between imagination and evidence is not a battle between beauty and truth. Imagination is necessary for documentary storytelling. It allows us to visualize process, scale, and human presence. But responsible reconstruction must remain transparent. The audience should know when it is seeing a measured restoration, when it is seeing a plausible reconstruction, and when it is seeing a symbolic scene created from tradition. The Queen of Sheba invites exaggeration because she arrives already wrapped in splendor. Artists give her impossible crowns. Films surround her with mountains of gold. Palaces become fantasies of silk and polished stone. The real monuments of Saba offer something more powerful than fantasy, evidence of institutions capable of organizing labor and projecting authority in an environment that demanded intelligence. Now imagine a royal court in such a kingdom. The ruler's power would depend on alliances with tribes and elites, on sacred legitimacy, on the security of trade, and on the management of water. Decisions could not be reduced to personal desire. A ruler who misjudged war might lose caravans, fields, labor, and loyalty. This context gives special weight to the Quranic portrait of the Queen of Sheba, consulting her counsel before deciding how to answer Solomon. The text does not show a passive monarch waiting to be rescued or conquered. It shows a ruler reading a threat, requesting advice, testing intention, and calculating the cost of invasion. Whether or not this scene preserves a historical event, it reflects real questions of ancient kingship. Power is never merely the possession of force. It is the ability to know when force should not be used. The kingdom behind the legend was built through systems that required judgment. Water had to be released at the right moment. Caravans had to be protected, but not overtaxed. Temples had to command reverence. Rivals had to be watched. Gifts had to be interpreted. In such a world, diplomacy was not decoration. It was survival. And in the stories that made her immortal, the Queen of Sheba survives because she understands that truth before many kings do. To modernize, incense can seem small, a fragment of resin, a thin line of smoke, a fragrance that disappears within minutes. In the ancient world, it could carry the value of distance. Frankincense is harvested by cutting the bark of certain trees and allowing aromatic resin to form in tears. Myrrh is gathered through a related process. The work requires knowledge of season, plant, climate, and timing. The product is light enough to transport, but rare enough to command high value. That combination made aromatics ideal goods for long-distance exchange. They were burned before gods, used in funerary practices, mixed into perfumes and medicines, and consumed by royal and wealthy households. A temple that burned incense each day created continuous demand, a culture that associated fragrance with purity, divinity, healing, or status transformed resin into power. The so-called incense route was not one road controlled by one people from beginning to end. It was a network. Goods passed through different hands, territories, and political systems. Caravans needed water, grazing, protection, guides, agreements, and places to rest. Ports connected sea lanes to overland routes. Markets linked local production to international demand. Saba's influence grew partly from its position within these networks. But the kingdom did not simply own every tree, camel, road, and market. Its power depended on participation, taxation, protection, negotiation, and at times military competition. A caravan was a moving economy. It could contain merchants, guards, handlers, translators, servants, animals, food, waterskins, gifts, letters, and information. It moved at the pace of the slowest animal. It was vulnerable to heat, injury, theft, political change, and the failure of wells. This slow movement matters when we imagine the Queen of Sheba's journey. The biblical story describes a very great caravan carrying spices, gold, and precious stones. The scale signals more than wealth. It signals the ability to mobilize people and resources across distance. Such a journey would have been a diplomatic expedition, a logistical operation, and a public performance of sovereignty. Every load announced the status of the visitor. Every guard announced that she could protect what she possessed. Every rare gift said, "My land has access to things your land desires." Diplomatic gifts in the ancient world were not simple acts of generosity. They established rank, tested relationships, and created obligations. A gift could be tribute, invitation, challenge, negotiation, or strategic theater. The receiver had to interpret it correctly. In the biblical narrative, the queen brings gifts after coming to test Solomon. The exchange confirms mutual magnificence. She praises what she sees, gives extraordinary riches, and receives gifts in return. In the Quranic narrative, the queen sends a gift before traveling. It is a political test. She wants to learn whether Solomon is a king who can be satisfied by wealth or a messenger whose demand cannot be purchased. Solomon rejects the gift, and the rejection changes her calculation. The same language of wealth serves two different narrative purposes. In one account, gifts celebrate wisdom and royal abundance. In the other, gifts expose the limits of wealth. The stories understand something fundamental about ancient diplomacy. Objects speak. Gold speaks of access to mines, trade, or tribute. Spices speak of distant landscapes and controlled routes. Precious stones speak of rarity and selection. A throne speaks of legitimacy. A letter speaks with the authority of the absent ruler. And a rejected gift can speak louder than an accepted one. The road of incense also explains why the Queen of Sheba could become a figure claimed by more than one region. Southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa were never isolated worlds. The Red Sea is a barrier, but it is also a corridor. People, languages, goods, plants, artistic forms, and political ideas moved across it. Sabaean presence and influence are visible in parts of the Horn, while African products and communities formed part of the wider commercial environment of the Red Sea. This interconnected geography later allowed Yemen and Ethiopia to preserve powerful but different claims upon the queen. To ask whether she was Arabian or African may therefore impose a modern boundary on an ancient world of movement. The strongest archaeological center of the Sabaean kingdom lies in Yemen. Ethiopian tradition, however, made the queen central to its own sacred and royal history. The legend crossed the sea because the sea had always been crossed. Aromatic smoke offers a fitting image for the queen's story. It begins in one place, moves through another, changes shape, and fills spaces far from its source. You can see it. You can feel its effect. But the closer you reach to grasp it, the more it slips through the hand. The earliest surviving literary portrait of the Queen of Sheba appears in the Hebrew Bible, in the first book of Kings, with a parallel account in the second book of Chronicles. The episode is brief. Its influence is enormous. The queen hears of Solomon's fame in connection with the name of the Lord. She comes to test him with hard questions. She arrives with a great company and camels bearing spices, very much gold, and precious stones. She speaks with Solomon about everything on her mind. He answers her questions. She observes his wisdom, the house he built, the food of his table, the organization of his officials and servants, and the worship connected to his court. She is overwhelmed. Then she praises the God of Israel for placing Solomon on the throne, gives her gifts, receives what she desires, and returns to her land. The text never gives the queen a personal name. It never describes her face, age, clothing, husband, parents, or heir. It never says that she married Solomon. It never says that she had his child. It never identifies her with the later names Bilqis or Makeda. Those details belong to later traditions. The biblical queen enters the story because Solomon's wisdom has become international. Her journey demonstrates that his reputation reaches the distant south, and that even a wealthy foreign sovereign recognizes the excellence of his rule. She is therefore both a character and a witness. The responsible conclusion is narrower. The text cannot presently be matched to a securely identified queen in contemporary South Arabian inscriptions. The biblical episode also belongs to a literary portrait of Solomon's reign at its height. Nations hear of his wisdom, wealth flows to Jerusalem. The kingdom appears ordered, admired, and secure. But the wider biblical narrative will not allow that perfection to last. Solomon's reign becomes shadowed by excess, foreign alliances, religious failure, and the division that follows his death. The queen's visit, therefore, stands near the summit before decline. She arrives when wisdom appears complete. That dramatic placement shaped later readings. The queen could be interpreted as the nations coming to divine wisdom, as the church seeking Christ, as the foreign world acknowledging Israel's God, or as a royal woman whose intelligence crosses religious and geographic boundaries. Artists did not paint a stable historical portrait. They painted their own world into her. In some European works, she resembles a medieval queen. In others, she is presented as African, Arabian, or vaguely Eastern. Her clothing changes with fashion. Her body becomes a site upon which cultures express ideas about race, gender, luxury, temptation, holiness, and foreignness. The biblical text gives almost no physical description, so each age fills the silence. But one element remains remarkably consistent. She comes because she has heard, and she refuses to rely on rumor alone. She must see. She must ask. She must judge. Her famous declaration is not merely flattery. It is the conclusion of an investigation. The reports were true, she says in effect, but she had not believed until she came and saw. Even then, the reality exceeded what she had heard. This structure transforms the queen into the ideal witness. She begins skeptical, tests the claim, observes the evidence, and delivers a verdict. In a documentary about her, there is a strange reversal. She once traveled to test the truth of another ruler's reputation. Now we travel through archaeology and tradition to test the truth of hers. Chapter 6. Hard Questions. The responsible conclusion is narrower. The text cannot presently be matched to a securely identified queen in contemporary South Arabian inscriptions. The biblical episode also belongs to a literary portrait of Solomon's reign at its height. Nations hear of his wisdom, wealth flows to Jerusalem. The kingdom appears ordered, admired, and secure. But the wider biblical narrative will not allow that perfection to last. Solomon's reign becomes shadowed by excess, foreign alliances, religious failure, and the division that follows his death. The queen's visit, therefore, stands near the summit before decline. She arrives when wisdom appears complete. That dramatic placement shaped later readings. The queen could be interpreted as the nations coming to divine wisdom, as the church seeking Christ, as the foreign world acknowledging Israel's God, or as a royal woman whose intelligence crosses religious and geographic boundaries. Artists did not paint a stable historical portrait. They painted their own world into her. In some European works, she resembles a medieval queen. In others, she is presented as African, Arabian, or vaguely Eastern. Her clothing changes with fashion. Her body becomes a site upon which cultures express ideas about race, gender, luxury, temptation, holiness, and foreignness. The biblical text gives almost no physical description, so each age fills the silence. But one element remains remarkably consistent. She comes because she has heard, and she refuses to rely on rumor alone. She must see. She must ask. She must judge. Her famous declaration is not merely flattery. It is the conclusion of an investigation. The reports were true, she says in effect, but she had not believed until she came and saw. Even then, the reality exceeded what she had heard. This structure transforms the queen into the ideal witness. She begins skeptical, tests the claim, observes the evidence, and delivers a verdict. In a documentary about her, there is a strange reversal. She once traveled to test the truth of another ruler's reputation. Now we travel through archaeology and tradition to test the truth of hers. Chapter 6. Hard Questions. The idea of the riddle also reflects diplomacy itself. Royal meetings rarely mean only what they say. A question may be a threat. A gift may be an evaluation. A banquet may display hierarchy. A seating arrangement may communicate status. A marriage proposal may conceal an alliance. An unanswered letter may be an insult. The Queen of Sheba's journey can therefore be read as a sequence of tests, even when no literal riddle survives. Can Solomon's reputation withstand inspection? Can his court display order without revealing weakness? Can the queen enter his capital without becoming subordinate? Can two wealthy rulers exchange gifts without turning generosity into tribute? The story's continued fascination lies partly in the fact that both rulers appear to pass. Later, romance often overwhelms this political intelligence. A beautiful queen and a powerful king are easily transformed into lovers. But the earliest biblical account is not a love story. Its dramatic center is wisdom recognized through examination. That distinction is important because it allows the queen to remain more than an accessory to Solomon's biography. She is the person who asks whether magnificence is real. She is the foreign observer who sees the court as a whole. She is the skeptic whose praise matters because it was not guaranteed. And once her questions disappeared from the text, generations of readers began asking their own, "What does wisdom look like? How can truth be distinguished from performance? When should a ruler believe a report? What can be learned only by making the journey?" The idea of the riddle also reflects diplomacy itself. Royal meetings rarely mean only what they say. A question may be a threat. A gift may be an evaluation. A banquet may display hierarchy. A seating arrangement may communicate status. A marriage proposal may conceal an alliance. An unanswered letter may be an insult. The Queen of Sheba's journey can therefore be read as a sequence of tests, even when no literal riddle survives. Can Solomon's reputation withstand inspection? Can his court display order without revealing weakness? Can the queen enter his capital without becoming subordinate? Can two wealthy rulers exchange gifts without turning generosity into tribute? The story's continued fascination lies partly in the fact that both rulers appear to pass. Later, romance often overwhelms this political intelligence. A beautiful queen and a powerful king are easily transformed into lovers. But the earliest biblical account is not a love story. Its dramatic center is wisdom recognized through examination. That distinction is important because it allows the queen to remain more than an accessory to Solomon's biography. She is the person who asks whether magnificence is real. She is the foreign observer who sees the court as a whole. She is the skeptic whose praise matters because it was not guaranteed. And once her questions disappeared from the text, generations of readers began asking their own, "What does wisdom look like? How can truth be distinguished from performance? When should a ruler believe a report? What can be learned only by making the journey?" The Quran tells the story differently. The queen is still unnamed. Solomon is still a ruler of extraordinary authority and wisdom. But the encounter now unfolds through revelation, moral choice, signs, and submission to God. The account appears in Surah An-Naml, the chapter known as the ant. Solomon reviews the birds and notices the absence of the hoopoe. The bird returns with news from a land Solomon does not yet know. It has found a woman ruling over a people. She has been given abundance. She possesses a magnificent throne. But she and her people prostrate themselves before the sun instead of God. In only a few lines, the Quran gives the queen a political profile. She rules. She possesses resources. She has a throne described as great. Her kingdom is organized enough to attract the attention of an informed observer. The problem in the narrative is not that a woman holds authority. The problem is worship directed toward the created sun rather than the Creator. This distinction is essential. The text does not introduce her as foolish because she is female. In fact, her later decisions display caution, consultation, and intelligence. Solomon commands the hoopoe to deliver a letter and then observe how the recipients respond. The letter is brief and absolute. It begins in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. It warns the queen and her people not to rise arrogantly against Solomon and calls them to come in submission. The queen receives it. The scene now moves away from Solomon and remains with her. That narrative choice allows the audience to watch a ruler think. She addresses her council with dignity. A noble letter has been delivered to her. She reads its content. Then she asks for counsel, stating that she does not decide a matter until her leading men are present. This is one of the most remarkable moments in her story. The queen is powerful, yet she consults. She does not confuse authority with isolation. She does not rush to answer an unfamiliar demand with wounded pride. She recognizes that the letter may lead to war and brings the decision into council. Her advisers answer in the language of strength. They possess power. They are formidable in war, but the command belongs to her. Their response is loyal but incomplete. Military capacity tells a ruler what can be attempted. It does not tell a ruler what should be done. The queen supplies the missing judgment. She says that kings, when they enter a land, ruin it and reduce its honored people to humiliation. The statement is not an abstract theory. It is a ruler's understanding of invasion. Cities can be taken. Elites can be broken. Populations can be displaced. The language of victory often hides the experience of those whose land becomes the battlefield. Her warning has often been admired as evidence of political realism. She does not deny the courage of her commanders. She calculates the cost of proving it. This is not cowardice, it is statecraft. She chooses to send a gift and wait for the response of her envoys. The gift is an experiment. If Solomon is an ordinary king seeking wealth, wealth may satisfy him. If he is motivated by something beyond wealth, his answer will reveal it. The queen's strategy uses time. A gift delays war. An embassy gathers intelligence. A response clarifies intention. Distance becomes protection while information returns. This is diplomacy at its most disciplined. Do not commit the kingdom before understanding the opponent. When the delegation reaches Solomon, the gift is rejected. What God has given him is better than what they bring. The envoys are told to return. The warning of military power becomes explicit. The test has produced an answer. Solomon cannot be purchased. The rejected gift changes the queen's position. Her strategy has not failed. It has succeeded by revealing a truth she needed to know. The Quranic queen therefore begins her journey not because she has been dazzled by Solomon's fame, but because a confrontation has developed between two forms of authority. Her authority rests on kingdom, council, wealth, and throne. Solomon's authority in the narrative rests on kingship, joined to prophecy and divine favor. The meeting will test more than intelligence. It will test the foundations upon which power is built. The decision to travel is often narrated quickly, but for a ruler, leaving the capital is never a simple movement from one place to another. Who governs during the absence? Who guards the treasury? Which officials travel and which remain? How many soldiers accompany the caravan without turning a diplomatic visit into an invasion? What gifts are carried after the first gift has been rejected? What route is secure? What message does departure send to rivals? And what happens if the ruler does not return? The Quran does not describe these logistics, but the political reality helps us feel the scale of the queen's choice. She is not a private seeker wandering toward wisdom. She is a sovereign, moving with the weight of a kingdom behind her. Her throne becomes central before she arrives. Solomon asks his assembly, who can bring it before the queen comes in submission? One powerful being offers to bring it before Solomon rises from his place. Another, described as possessing knowledge from the book, offers to bring it in the blink of an eye. The throne appears before Solomon. He responds by attributing the event to the grace of his Lord and recognizes it as a test of gratitude. The scene is not only spectacle, it establishes a moral contrast. Power creates a test for the person who possesses it. Will extraordinary ability produce arrogance or gratitude? Solomon's response prevents the miracle from becoming self-worship. The achievement is not presented as proof that he is divine, but as a reason to recognize divine grace. The queen's throne is then altered so that her perception can be tested. When she arrives, she is asked whether the throne before her is like her throne. Her answer is cautious. It is as though it were the same. The answer has fascinated commentators because it is neither naive denial nor impulsive certainty. She recognizes, she qualifies, she refuses to claim more than she knows. This is the language of a disciplined mind. The throne is more than royal furniture. It represents her established world, her sovereignty, identity, order, and status. To see it displaced and transformed is to see the apparent stability of political power made uncertain. A throne seems immovable because people agree that it is the center. Move it, and the symbol reveals its dependence. In the biblical story, the queen tests Solomon. In the Quranic story, she is also tested, but the tests are not designed merely to embarrass her. They expose the limits of appearances and inherited assumptions. She once trusted the sun as an object of worship. She trusted the security of her throne. She trusted wealth as a diplomatic instrument. One by one, those certainties are challenged, yet the narrative does not portray her as incapable of learning. Her greatness lies partly in adaptation. A lesser ruler could respond to every surprise with denial. She observes, she revises, she continues. This quality connects the scriptural versions despite their differences. In the Bible, she hears and verifies. In the Quran, she receives signs and responds. In both, she is mobile in mind as well as body. The journey matters because travel breaks the protection of certainty. At home, a ruler is surrounded by familiar rituals, familiar advisors, and architecture designed to confirm authority. In a foreign court, every assumption can be questioned. The queen's dignity does not come from never being wrong. It comes from refusing to remain wrong when evidence changes. The final scene of the Quranic encounter is among the most visually powerful in sacred literature. The queen is invited to enter a palace or elevated hall. She sees what appears to be a body of water and lifts her garment to step through it. Solomon tells her that it is a surface made smooth with glass. The exact visual reconstruction is debated. Translators and commentators have described a glass floor, a crystal surface, or a polished structure under which water could be seen. The central effect is clear. Perception is challenged. What appears to be water is not water. What appears solid may be transparent. What appears simple contains hidden design, difference. Some traditions invented rumors that she had hairy legs, animal feet, or other unusual features, and then used the glass floor as a trick to expose them. These details are not stated in the Quran. They reflect later fascination with controlling, examining, or exoticizing a powerful woman. A responsible documentary should identify them as later legend, not merge them into the scriptural account. The Quranic scene is already complete without them. The queen confronts a structure that reveals the unreliability of immediate appearance. The sequence forms a pattern. The sun appears overwhelmingly powerful, yet it is created. Wealth appears capable of solving political conflict, yet it is rejected. The throne appears fixed, yet it is moved. The floor appears liquid, yet it is solid. The queen's transformation is therefore connected to a re-education of sight. She does not simply exchange one ruler's authority for another. She learns that created things, however magnificent, should not be confused with the source of creation. At the end of the encounter, she acknowledges that she has wronged herself and submits with Solomon to God, Lord of the worlds. She submits with Solomon to God. The two stand within the same act of worship. This protects the conclusion from becoming a crude celebration of male conquest over a female ruler. Solomon's role is prophetic guidance. The queen's final allegiance is divine. The Quran does not continue with a marriage. It does not say that she becomes Solomon's wife. It does not say that she abandons her people. It does not narrate her death. It ends at the moment of recognition. Later tradition will attempt to complete her life. It will give her a name, ancestry, palace, marriage, and descendants. But the sacred text stops after the moral transformation. That ending allows the queen to remain a ruler and a believer without reducing her to a romantic reward. The Quran does not continue with a marriage. It does not say that she becomes Solomon's wife. It does not say that she abandons her people. It does not narrate her death. It ends at the moment of recognition. Later tradition will attempt to complete her life. It will give her a name, ancestry, palace, marriage, and descendants. But the sacred text stops after the moral transformation. That ending allows the queen to remain a ruler and a believer without reducing her to a romantic reward. The Quran leaves the queen unnamed. Later, Islamic tradition gives her the name by which she is now most widely known in the Arab and Muslim worlds, Bilqis, also written Balkis or Balkis. The origin of the name is uncertain. It does not appear in the Quranic passage. Over time, however, it became so closely attached to the story that places in Yemen were named for her in popular memory. The throne of Bilqis, the sanctuary of Bilqis, the palace of Bilqis. Legend settled upon the landscape. Commentators and storytellers expanded the queen's ancestry. Some made one of her parents connected to the jinn. Some explained her rise to power through a struggle against a tyrant. Some described how she preserved her people through intelligence. Some married her to Solomon. Others had her return to rule her own kingdom. These stories differ, contradict one another, and belong to a broad world of interpretation rather than to a single authoritative biography. They reveal what later audiences wanted to know. How could a woman become queen? Why did she worship the sun? What happened after her declaration of faith? Did she marry? Who inherited her throne? When a sacred text offers a powerful figure but few biographical details, tradition moves into the open space. Bilqis became an example in discussions of wisdom, consultation, humility, and leadership. Her council scene could be praised as shura, consultation before decision. Her gift could be interpreted as strategic testing. Her conversion could be presented as the triumph of truth over inherited worship. But she could also become a target of suspicion, because she was a powerful woman. Later tales about her body often attempt to make her strange. Her intelligence is accepted, then balanced by a physical secret. Her sovereignty is admired, then redirected into marriage. Her independence is celebrated, then explained through supernatural ancestry. These patterns are not unique to Bilqis. Powerful women in legend are often made either more than human or less than fully human, because ordinary political authority seems insufficient to explain them. Yet Bilqis continually escapes reduction. She remains the ruler who asks her council for advice. She remains the diplomat who understands the destruction caused by invasion. She remains the observer who answers cautiously when shown the altered throne. She remains the believer whose submission is directed to God, not to royal spectacle. For many audiences, that is why her story feels modern, even while it belongs to an ancient sacred world. She changes her mind without losing dignity. She chooses peace without being weak. She recognizes truth without ceasing to be intelligent. And she shows that humility at its highest level is not humiliation. It is the courage to revise the self. The Queen of Sheba has no verified portrait. That absence gave the world permission to create thousands. Every image makes a choice: skin tone, crown, body, age, costume, expression, Arabian, African, European, or imagined Eastern architecture. The choices are rarely neutral. They reveal the society looking at her. In Christian interpretation, the queen could symbolize the nations recognizing sacred wisdom. She could prefigure the arrival of foreign worshippers, or represent the church approaching Christ. In Ethiopia, Makeda embodied royal ancestry and sacred destiny. In Islamic culture, Bilqis became a model of intelligence and conversion, while also attracting legends about femininity, the supernatural, and kingship. In European art and literature, she was often exoticized. Distance became sensuality. Wealth became excess. The intellectual challenger could be replaced by the seductive woman. The shift tells us less about the ancient queen than about the fantasies of empire and gender that shaped the artists. The earliest texts say remarkably little about her appearance. Later images say almost nothing else. This transformation is common in the afterlife of powerful women. Their political actions become beauty. Their speech becomes mystery. Their authority becomes seduction. A documentary can resist that pattern. Costume may be magnificent, but it should communicate office. Jewelry may be present, but it should not replace intelligence. The queen's body should not become the explanation for why Solomon listens. He listens because she is a sovereign with questions. Modern audiences have also reclaimed her as a symbol of Black history, Arab heritage, female leadership, and cross-cultural identity. These interpretations can be meaningful, but they should remain attentive to evidence. The queen can inspire without being turned into a weapon against another culture's inheritance. Her story is strongest when its plurality is acknowledged. She belongs to the Bible and the Quran in different ways. She belongs to Ethiopia through a national epic of enormous importance. She belongs to Yemen through the historical kingdom of Saba and the landscapes attached to Bilqis. She belongs to art because artists never stopped imagining her. And she belongs to debate because no single portrait can close the question. The many faces of Sheba teach a documentary viewer to ask not only, is this image accurate? Ask also, why did this age need her to look this way? A pale medieval queen may show that an artist translated foreign history into familiar royalty. A highly sensual Orientalist queen may reveal colonial fantasy. A regal Ethiopian Makeda may express sacred genealogy. A Yemeni Bilqis standing before Marib may express cultural belonging and continuity. The image is evidence, but often evidence of the period that created it. After archaeology, scripture, legend, and art, the original question remains, was the Queen of Sheba real? The most honest answer is that a final historical identification has not been made. But the answer is not simply no. The kingdom was real. The roads were real. The incense trade was real. The temples, inscriptions, and irrigation works were real. Powerful women ruled in parts of ancient Arabia, even if no known Sabaean inscription currently confirms the queen from the scriptural accounts. Long-distance diplomacy was real. Stories crossed the Red Sea and the desert because people did. A historical queen may stand behind the tradition. A memory of southern rulers may have been condensed into one figure. A literary author may have shaped the ideal visitor needed for a story about wisdom. The available evidence does not force a single conclusion. What can be said with confidence is that the queen became real in another sense. She affected history through memory. She legitimized dynasties. She inspired pilgrimage, art, literature, music, and film. She gave names to monuments. She became a model in discussions of leadership and faith. She helped Ethiopia imagine a sacred royal ancestry. She helped Yemen present the grandeur of ancient Saba. She allowed generations to debate the nature of wisdom. A person does not need to be archaeologically identified to exercise historical influence. The influence of the Queen of Sheba is undeniable. Her leadership contains a lesson that survives every version. She does not mistake aggression for strength. When her commanders announce their power, she thinks about what kings do to invaded lands. She does not mistake wealth for universal influence. She sends a gift, observes its rejection, and changes strategy. She does not mistake rumor for knowledge. In the biblical account, she travels to test what she has heard. She does not mistake caution for indecision. When shown a throne like her own, she answers with precision rather than pride. She does not mistake changing her mind for losing herself. In the Quranic account, recognition leads to faith. The Queen's journey is therefore not merely from Saba to Jerusalem. It is from report to knowledge, from confidence to examination, from appearance to understanding, from inherited certainty to chosen conviction. That structure explains why the story survived when the names of many documented kings disappeared from public memory. A royal inscription may say, "I built, I conquered, I dedicated." The Queen of Sheba's story asks, "What did you learn?" History and faith approach her differently. The historian asks for dates, inscriptions, and context. The believer may ask for moral truth. The artist asks what she looked like. The politician asks what she represented. The archaeologist asks what the soil contains. The storyteller asks why the audience still cares. None of these questions should silence the others, but each must be clear about its method. Confusion begins when legend is presented as excavation, when archaeology is used to dismiss the meaning of faith, or when sacred narrative is treated as if it were a modern administrative record. Understanding begins when categories remain distinct enough to speak honestly, and close enough to illuminate one another. The Queen of Sheba may never step out of the shadows with a birth name and a dated inscription. Perhaps that is why she continues to command attention. She is not trapped inside a single archive. She moves from Yemen to Jerusalem, from scripture to commentary, from Arabia to Ethiopia, from temple ruins to illuminated manuscripts, from royal genealogy to modern cinema. Every culture receives her, tests her, and sends her onward changed. Once, according to the story, a queen heard of wisdom in a distant land. She could have remained in her palace and trusted the report. Once, according to the story, a queen heard of wisdom in a distant land. She could have remained in her palace and trusted the report. Instead, she prepared a caravan. She crossed the dangerous spaces between kingdoms. She entered a foreign court. She asked hard questions, and she allowed the answers to transform her. That may be the most enduring truth in the legend. Wisdom does not belong only to the person who answers. It also belongs to the person brave enough to make the journey and ask. The story should not end by abandoning the land that gave Saba its historical home. The ruins of Marib are not relics on an empty planet. They exist within modern Yemen, a country of living communities, layered history, extraordinary architecture, and profound hardship. Conflict has threatened archaeological sites and limited conservation. Objects have been looted. Monuments face damage. Research has been interrupted. Yet the inheritance of Saba survives through local knowledge and the work of people committed to preserving it. To admire the Queen of Sheba while ignoring the protection of Saba would be a final contradiction. The legend has drawn the eyes of the world. Those eyes should also see the responsibility that comes with attention.